Hello and welcome back, and a number of you are looking at this video right now and have looked at the bottom of the screen and gone, "Phew, this video's a bit long, isn't it? They're normally, what, 10, 15, 20 minutes long?" I get it, this is a very long video, but let me explain. This is the Amber Pro from Latticeworks, and it is trying to forge a new way into the market where you have NAS that has a little bit more of a learning curve, and this system is trying to bring similar hardware and software services in a user-friendly way. And frankly, it is not the sort of device normally I would feature on the channel because I like to talk a lot about NAS, a bit more technical, and this is aimed at people with practically no tech knowledge. So the reason I've gone into so much detail in the video is so long is because I want it to be as fair as possible to this system and talk about its pros, its cons, and ultimately can I recommend it to you. So I apologise for the length of the video, and I hope it isn't too difficult for you to follow all the way through. I'll see you at the end. Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about a product that a number of you have inquired about in the last few months. This is the Amber Pro from Latticeworks. This is kind of a new take on a 2-bay NAS system with the enormous emphasis on simplicity. But before we go any further, let's knock out a few disclaimers. Firstly, this has been supplied by Amber themselves. They've sent me a review unit. I've not even opened it yet, all the plastics on it. And this video review is going to be made up in two main parts. This first part, we're going to open up this box and see what we get inside. We're going to talk a little bit more about the hardware as well, something I definitely want to discuss. And then we're going to move on to the software portion once we've got this device set up to see which software and services are included. But it is worth highlighting, let's be completely frank, particularly if you're one of the people that have subscribed to this channel for a while, I talk a lot about NAS, traditional NAS, servers that we can have in our homes, devices that we can have in small businesses, all the way up to enterprise at rack mount level. And this device, although it is going for a very user-friendly approach and it's trying to make things as simple as possible, has to be said that in hardware terms, is very much lower in the chain than a number of devices that I talk about on the channel quite a lot. And throughout this video, as independent as I'm going to try to be, of course, I am of course going to be looking at this through a lens of network attached storage. And although I applaud any device that is going to be fantastically user friendly and allow, day-to-day pedestrian users to have access to their own private cloud, something this recommends in spades, it has to be said that comparing these and that are going to be a very tough gig. So I will try to be as independent of my NAS background as possible when looking at this, but let's be completely upfront, it's going to be very hard to do that throughout this video. But disclaimer off the way, let's have a look at this device. Now, this is a 2-bay device. It arrives with storage pre-installed. There's two versions out there. There's a version with two 1 TB drives and two 2 TB drives. And the device knocks around, depending on that configuration of storage, for between £499 and £599. So immediately I can hear a number of you going, what the actual flip? That is not cheap, and that's true. Compared with a lot of 2-bay devices like this one over here, this 2-bay, and I tried, but let's face it, a number of you are querying that price straight off the bat. A lot of 2-bays these days, unpopulated, will set you back between 200 and 300 nicker, and once you include a terabyte of storage, you're already looking at about 400 to 450 quid for that kind of storage. So it's quite a big ask. It is including storage and it is using 2.5-inch media, it has to be said, and it's got RAID built into it as well. So you've got RAID 0 that combines all that storage, or RAID 1 that acts as a mirror. I believe the RAID 1 is the default settings. But it has to be said, that price tag does seem a little bit steep. But remember, that price tag is going to be based on convenience. If we look in the past about the Apple time capsule, and we look at some of the early WD MyBook stuff and MyCloud stuff, you know that convenience, unfortunately, does come with a higher price tag because a lot of the things have to be built in for smooth, non-interactive configuration. You are just looking for set me up and roll me on Buttercup. I want this thing to work. And that is the target demographic for this box, not people that want to play with the settings, not people that want to play around with the configurations, play around with some of the network settings too much, knock around with the MTU, and like have their own configuration that is incredibly bespoke and technically minded. This is for people that want that amount of storage and those apps and that access and those backups and safety, but they don't want to have to read the A to Z of networking for dummies to get behind it. So again, let's go straight into it now. Now, could talk about the retail box, but unsurprisingly, any device that's going to be aimed at keeping this kind of slightly more intimidating technology as user-friendly as possible is going to keep it nice and easy going on the external packaging. As we go through it, let's open up the plastic here. Let's break the seal. We'll get this out of it. I've realised in hindsight, with all the lighting I have in this room, there's going to be a lot of shine off this external packaging, so I apologise in advance. Let's get that out of the box. There's a lot of talk on this about AI-powered services inside. It's worth highlighting this device. I'm informed it works at its best in conjunction with the cloud services it includes. Now, I use the word cloud. This is very much a hybrid system that utilises local network storage in conjunction with cloud access and management as well. There's a single access point that you can get into online, also network and internet access. You won't have to fiddle around and use a different door, IP versus network internet identity. You can just use the app and it will know which one is better or more suitable or even possible within your own given access situation for your backups or when you want to access the storage inside. So let's have a look in here. The AI powered stuff, I'm hoping there's a lot more about photo recognition. We'll go into that a little bit more in the software portion of this video. We can have a look. We've got protective foam. Again, I'll always enjoy any device that's well protected. Got information there about installing the app for the very first time. Inside there, got our box of accessories. Let's see what we get with this device. Because it's worth highlighting, this isn't just a cloud or a NAS. And the word, you'll notice when you go to a lot of the data sheets, product pages and stuff like that, they really do not use the word NAS very much. And when they do use the word NAS, it is an emphasis of comparison between them and NAS. Again, just adding more weight to this idea of them being independent beasts. But this is a router and combined private cloud solution. And that router portion does make up a decent chunk of that price tag, it has to be said. Any router that has internal storage or USB expandability, even when we look at some of the Netgear Nighthawk stuff, some of the QNAP storage-enabled cloud systems like the QHora series, or QMyro even, those ones, the price tag does start at £400, £500, £600. So the price, the more we look into it, isn't as gives you money than it sounded at early doors. So got a quick start installation guide for the first time setup. We have an external PSU. This is a 65 watt PSU, and again with 2.5 inch drives inside. This is not going to be a power hungry device to have on 24/7, which again, for those that have followed this channel for a long time, you know that NAS power consumption is very relative to the storage and power of the device you need. The demand will grow, and also, even in the grand scheme of things, unless you're running a rack mount solution, power consumption isn't that expensive, but still nonetheless, that's an incredibly modest PSU and an incredibly modest storage power requirement internally. Here, look inside, we have a Cat5e Ethernet. Again, this is a 1 GBE equipped device. It's got 3 ports that we'll talk about in a bit. LAN ports, gigabit LAN ports in WAN and LAN. But Cat5e is fine for 1 GBE. It's would have liked maybe to see a Wi-Fi 6 equivalent of this kind of stature device, or maybe even one with 2.5 gig, because I think we are starting to enter that realm of a lot of our day-to-day appliances, you know, arriving with Wi-Fi 6, new phones, new laptops, that sort of thing, and a lot of the new NASs and network switches and new routers started arriving with 2.5 GBE. So the fact that it's only arrived with 1 gigabit Ethernet throughout, I think, is a little bit of a missed opportunity in 2021. We have external power cables there that connect to the external PSU there. And that's really it. That's your accessories. So we'll get those out of the way. Pop that over there. And of course, we have the Amber itself. I will say, slightly larger than I thought it would be. And again, given this has only got 2.5-inch SSDs, not SSDs, 2.5-inch SATA hard drives inside, I'm actually really surprised that it's as large as it is. I know a bit of that is going to be cooling there, and of course it is a router system as well. I mean, let's be upfront. I chuffing love the design of this. I think it may be a bit bulky, but it looks lovely. I think this, in my home or office environment there on a shelf, I'll bring it up nice and close for you, I do think this device does look nice. I'm curious about the cooling. I know the noise was reported at 19.9 dBA whilst in operation, which again is pretty low, it has to be said. But I do think the design of the device could give Synology a run for their money. A lot of people would compare this to like an air filter or an aircon device in their local environment. And it is plastic, external chassis with a metallic internals. But I don't know, I quite like this design. This has really, really grown on me. And again, we will get the top of this chassis off to have a look at the storage options inside. But before we go any further, let's talk about some of those internal parts. So, the CPU inside, which I know that Amber or Latticeworks, they've tried to keep this as modest as possible, and I get that. You know, when we look at Synology and QNAP and all these NAS storage providers, and particularly router providers as well, and they rely on their Qualcomm SoC, software on chips, I would say that even in that capacity, this CPU manages to be a little too modest for my liking, particularly because this runs container applications as well, which again is a big boom for this. A lot of people compare this device to the likes of the TS220J or Plus, or the QNAP TS230 or the TS251D, but it does have an Intel-based CPU inside, but it's not exactly groundbreaking. It is the Intel dual-core N4000. I had to really dig to get that CPU model, by the way. And that is a dual-core 1.1 gigahertz CPU, which is pretty modest, let's be honest. But it can be burst when required to up to 2.6 gigahertz per core. Now that CPU does support DDR4 memory, with the device arriving with 2 gig of non-expandable DDR4 2400 megahertz memory, and that CPU does have embedded graphics as UHD 600, which again is the same embedded graphics support that we find in the likes of the modern generation Synology and QNAP NASes out there. And again, I'm going to keep comparing it, I'm so sorry. But that CPU, nevertheless, is a little humble. CPU benchmark rated around 1450 on their scoring system there. And although it is arguably more powerful than the likes of the J and Affordable series from QNAP or Synology, who typically take advantage of Marvell and Realtek CPUs at 32 and 64-bit in architecture, and this device does arrive with an x86 64-bit processor in the Intel N400, it's still not quite as aggressive as the Celerons that we're seeing in the modern generation of the J4000 series, and it is a very efficient CPU at 1.1 gigahertz general clock that can be burst up, and technically a newer generation, but still, that is quite a modest CPU for that kind of price tag, and definitely I'm going to be interested to see just what that CPU gives us in terms of performance in the software overview. So if we look at the rear of this device, we can see a multitude of fun ports there, and there really was a few surprises here for me. When I first was contacted about reviewing this device, I kind of expected, when I saw it was a router plus cloud, that it would be a very basic box that I was looking at here. So when I was originally prepping for this video, there's a lot of stuff to, kind of be impressed by here. And again, keep your hat on before you say, well, the DS920's got everything. I get that. But look at what we have here on this router and cloud system. Firstly, we've got the gigabit LANs that we mentioned earlier on as a router system. Now, I've already mentioned the lack of Wi-Fi 6 and the lack of 2.5 GBE, I find a tad underwhelming. Nevertheless, the fact that it has 1 gigabit WAN and a couple of gigabit LANs, so at least it has those 3 ports, mean that at least you have multiple connectivity there in a way that a lot of the more affordable NASs that have arrived on the scene recently with only 1 gigabit LAN port this can at least take advantage of dual port connectivity there. On top of that, we have got an HDMI out, which is something I'm looking forward to testing, if not in the software portion. If I can get things set up for it here, then definitely in a future video, but I'll seek confirmation on an HDMI port. We've also got two kinds of USB 3 port there. We've got a USB 3, they're both USB 3.2 Gen 1, it has to be said, so 5 gigabit connectivity. We've got a USB A and a USB C port there. Now, obviously you can use it for charging, but who's going to do that? But this does support external storage in traditional FAT32 and you know, the standard ones. But what's really interesting is this device supports BTRFS inside, something that Synology largely was behind for a very, very long time. And the fact they arrived with it and they don't feel the need to shout about it, I'm quite impressed by. So again, internally, the file system is BTRFS, and you don't really have to muck around. The whole thing will set itself up, including the RAID configuration, very, very easily inside. And again, there's a WPS button there for one button connectivity. I didn't see any kind of mesh support on this, but I think that might be asking a bit much of this at this stage. But let's have a look inside. Let's take a little look inside this device and have a look at the storage that we have on offer. So I've removed the back panel. It was just simply two screws, nice and easy there off the back. And we've got our two trays for disk 1 and disk 2 here. Now the system arrives with a 2-year warranty, and those drives are included in a 2-year warranty. I believe there is an extension program there for the warranty. One thing I was a little underwhelmed by, it has to be said, is this device not arriving with SSDs. Now again, that price tag, we've kind of drilled down a little bit into that, at least on a hardware level. And although it seems a little high, it's not too bad for what you're getting with a pre-populated device. But I still would have liked to have seen SSDs, particularly because if this device, promoting as it does, fast access of your online storage and backups nice and quickly and easy, particularly the streaming services that a slightly more modest CPU like this has. I would have liked to have seen SSDs because I think they would have brought a bit of a boost to the performance. And at 1 TB at 2.5 inch SATA in the current market, they wouldn't be that expensive over that of traditional 1 TB hard drives, which again you can pick up now for about 30-40 quid, and 1 TB drives you can pick up for about 50, 60, 70 at a pinch. But first thing I've got to say I'm not overly bowled over by is the fact they're utilising Seagate Barracuda drives in there. Now, I get it, in a mirrored RAID, using NAS drives isn't as important, but still nonetheless, Barracuda hard drives inside, I would have liked to have seen something maybe along the lines of WD Red 1 TBs. They've got those drives out there, maybe even some Seagate Barracudas inside there, or I don't know, I'm not overly bowled over, but still nonetheless, at least they are 2 TB Barracudas, and marginally in their defence, 2 TB, 2.5 inch drives in hard drive form are not that easy to come by. Lots of brands kind of make that jump up at that point towards traditional hard drives. Another thing I will add in their defence, I should add early on, is the fact that with traditional hard drives, you don't have the endurance problems and the constant write degradation that you find in the likes of an SSD. SSDs, once you write more and more and more and more, and if I can ever learn to put this drive back in properly, you will find that SSDs do not endure. You have to go for like a MLC NAND or TLC NAND, so that might be one of the reasons why the brand did not opt for traditional, opt for SSDs inside this device over hard drives, but still would have liked to have seen SSDs inside. Another thing on this device that I'm really looking forward to seeing how it does is when we look at the software, I want to see about the internal temperatures, because this device, if it does have a fan, it's very well hidden unless it's built into that top turbine look inside. There is a huge amount of passive ventilation all the way around this device, which to me would imply the utilisation of a lot of heat sinks inside and therefore reduce noise when in operation. As mentioned, a couple of 2.25 inch hard drives are going to really make that noise very, very low, laptop grade drives. But for now, I think the external chassis is bigger than I thought. The hardware so far has not exactly blown my mind, although I would say the proof is going to be in the pudding when we go to the software. But for now, let's get this device set up and take a good look at the software and the many things that Amber and in turn, of course, Latticeworks say that this device can do for you in the most user-friendly way possible. So throughout the course of the software review part of this video, it's worth highlighting that we are going to be covering around about 6 different user interfaces all the way through. Everything ranging from the cloud user interface to the desktop user interface to the client applications we're going to be using an Android phone, but there is iOS as well, and of course the router stuff. And it has to be said that although this is advertised as a very simple system, things will ramp up throughout this video. So for those of you, much like myself, that looked at the Amber system and thought, man, it's going to be a bit overly easy, overly friendly, fair play to them. The more I've gone into this, the more I've found that configuration options are there. Although not all of it is as good as I'd like, and there are a few areas that I'm hoping the brand are going to improve throughout its lifespan. But on screen right now, you can see the following. You can see the client application. This is the Windows client app that allows you to synchronize areas of storage on your localized system, Windows desktop in this case, and also access all the files on this cloud system. Also in the background there, we have got the cloud storage area, the 2 gig of data that the brand give you. It's completely for free. It's, it's not linked to a subscription. They're not going to take it away, but at the same time, we have to bear in mind that 2 gig is not a lot, especially on a system like this that's 2 terabytes in a RAID 1 environment. So as nice as it is for 2 gig these days will not go very far. And even in my limited few days of usage on this system, I've already clocked up 13% of that cloud storage area. So if we have a look here at the client app, we can see here straight away in the My Amber field that the AI recognition has already started doing its thing there in the background. If we go to My Photos, I've stuck around about 6,000 photos on this system, and they're pretty wide ranging, everything from photos of outdoors to indoors, photos of food and more. I think thumbnail generation could be a little faster on this client app. I'm less keen on the speed at which this is doing it. So if we go into this one here, we can see some food photos there. We can go through some of the options, increase or decrease the quality. On top of that, we can kind of rotate it, but there's not much else you can do with those photos if we're perfectly honest. Again, we can zoom in a little bit, but not a vast amount, and you can do a slideshow. All pretty basic stuff, let's be honest. But if we go into the AI recognition, now, again, when I was using this, there's a few times in this video, you're going to see it later on, I think the AI recognition could be better. I think a number of us have gotten used to the likes of Google's own photo recognition in utilizing Google Photos with their AI recognition, as well as the NAS brands and their own QMaggie moments, etc. And although there is photo recognition here, and if we go to the ones of, say, me, for example, I think it could be better. I think again, that thumbnail generation there, it's a little sluggish. I kind of would have liked to have seen something a little bit quicker there, and I know it's pulling that metadata, but we've used web clients with NASs before, and it has been a lot better than that in the past. You're going to see more of that when we go to the mobile app, and again, recognizing people is pretty straightforward, so this isn't everyone. If we click add people, it shows us the database of faces that have been found. So, for example, if we go for this one here, this is Charlie. So again, we have to name her, but of course, if we look, we've already found Charlie over here, so we can just drag her over to there, merge them together, and then that face is now going to be recognized moving forward. And this has all been done with AI. Same goes in the background with indoor, but again, I think the fields and the tags are a little bit too vague for me. I mean, this is a plate of food, and I'll be honest, the most childish food I've ever made, a mashed volcano. But yes, that's indoors, I guess. But this isn't. This is outdoors. So again, the AI algorithm, they've already said themselves, I've reached out to Amber on this, and they have said they are improving it and working on it. Same with animals. We have photos of animals there, but I would say I have a lot of pictures of different animals from zoos to my own pets. And again, they have labelled this area pets, so fair play to them here. But again, sometimes when it's a child's book there, it could have been a little bit better there. I think the AI definitely is better than not having it, but it could be a lot better. Same goes for dining. They've recognised their own system in this field marked for food. which is quite strange there. Now, the AI is, it's better than I've seen on a lot of systems, a lot of the budget end of things, but I think we could expect more. And again, then you've got access to the online resources as well. So we've got the multiple folders on the system there. If we go to the cloud folder, that's that 13% backup that we've got there. So if we go to uploads, these are uploads from the mobile phone client. So we can go into the camera and find lots of information there. So let's go for a more recent photo there. There's one of a cat. We can double click it. Boom, there's my sleepy cat. But we, of course, can also share this picture if we want. So we can go ahead and do a nice, easy share. We can either add an Amber login there. We can do a public link so they can download or look at the photo. And again, you can just share that link on social media. You can change the expiration. I think, again, this is kind of what I would have expected, but a little less flexibility than I'd like. I don't really like the vagueness of the days. I know they're keeping it simple, but I kind of wish it was a little bit more detailed than that. So again, we can do lots of, we can, download a local copy if we choose, add it to a new folder, find out a little bit more information about it. And again, see how much of the scraping of metadata has happened, but there's not a vast amount, given this is taken from a mobile phone. Normally we would have seen a little bit of metadata there getting scraped up. And again, I think this is one of those areas that in the improvements of recognition, we're going to see them working on there. On the bottom, we've got access to the local computer, and this is, I've got a synchronization job and a backup job happening between this system as well. It's quite easy to set that up. This is the photo album here on my local PC. So if we go to the settings there, nice and easy, lots of photos, all of there, all being backed up onto the system. And you can also do a synchronization folder between the Amber system and your computer so that there's a shared folder between the two systems at all times. So this folder here on my local PC will be constantly synchronized with the Amber, and that works in both directions. So again, not too shabby, but the responsiveness, I do still feel it could be a little better, particularly when we are accessing the device on the local area network. We are using the system's own Wi-Fi as a router there. Switching over to the mobile phone applications now, we can have a look at the three main applications that the brand offer, and that's Amber IX, Amber Life, and the Amber Manager. So again, if we carry on, I would say we can go to the better app of the three, and that's the Amber IX. And from here, you do log in. I've already gone past that. And from here, you can kind of manipulate a lot of the backup tasks that you've created, manage some of the shares of files that you may have created earlier on, some of the offline files if you want to download them locally to your system, and find out a little bit more about what folders on your local system are backing up to your Amber unit. On the camera roll there, you can see the photos that are being backed up between the two platforms. So again, lots going on there in the background, a big old picture of some pretzels. And again, these are ones on my local phone system there. You can change the backup routine if you like quite quickly on the fly from your phone, and all of this is done every time a photo is taken. You can access the cloud just like you could on the desktop client. You can find out more about the photos on the system and browse through some of the photos that are already backed up onto it. So again, we have some, I don't know why I took a picture of a TV with Charlie Brown on it, but there you go. Not Charlie Brown, Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. Good Lord, man. If we go into the people and things, we can go into some of that facial recognition. And again, this seems a great deal snappier as an application. And the tightness of its responsiveness there in the background, pretty straightforward indeed. Nice and easy. And again, we can find out a lot of similar information. We can choose to share that file if we choose. So we can go ahead and edit the share, generate a shareable link. Same as before, probably slightly less manipulation than I would have liked there. And again, you can do a slideshow quite easily. And it's, all the options are there that I would expect. And again, you can break that down into the individual people. And again, all of this has been generated nice and quickly on the fly. So if we look at notifications from the system, there's slightly less than you might like. And again, a lot of that will make a lot more sense when we go into the Amber Manager tool. And of course, the settings there is when you can change some of the configuration options. You can change some of the background stuff, how you want to know about stuff. And debugging, you can go into dev mode. But dev mode, you still need, I wouldn't recommend messing around with that on this system. And again, later on in the video you will see a much better tool for doing that. It tells you, this gives me the information I want, it has to be said. It, allows me to go through my files, it allows me to share the files quickly on the fly, and I can assess and change and modify that share info as quickly as I like. Although some of the options that I found on the desktop there with regards to how long they can last are unavailable here. If we go back to the desktop, we can go to what I think is the legacy app, Amber Life. Now, Amber Life, I'm not sure which one of these two apps came first, but I did find that browsing files on this, although it has features that are not available in the other app, so if we go to the ongoing shares there and we try to edit the share information, we can do a little bit more, not much more, but we can change some of the exploration on some of the ins and outs of those shares there in a way that we couldn't on the previous app. Also, we've got information on the system there. We've got that nice system image. But when I went into the People tab, so for example, I would look at Morgan here and click Morgan, it wouldn't come up with the face data. And this was quite on and off, this area here. And again, the brand themselves, I did ask them about this, and they did say that the AI-assisted photo recognition is still in development. Same goes with smart indexing, breaking it down into all those different fields. So if we go into pet, once again, it wasn't bringing me the information the way it did on the desktop client or the previous application. That said, there is general file browsing, something that wasn't available in the previous app. And if we go into it, we've got that TV control for when we're casting from this device to the Amber or using the HDMI out, something we're not really going to discuss too much in this video. And again, you can switch to local view, your camera roll, what you're going to be accessing and more. Then you've got access to the cloud, as mentioned earlier on with those cloud uploads. You can go into it. So it's all fairly standard stuff. I'm not going to say it's like overwhelming, but again, the kind of options you want are there, and there is configuration options to a degree. You can change how the system handles photos and videos, the cloud utilization, how much you allow it to use, which folders you want it to use, how you want things displayed, the usual stuff that you might expect, and a lot of the general configuration options are all readily available as well. So again, as far as file management goes, the desktop client and the mobile client, all of the ones we looked at so far all seem fairly normal, if a little bit safe. Now, the last one we want to look at is the Anchor Manager on mobile app before we switch back to the desktop. This is where we can get a little bit more analytical information here on the system, so you can see lots of stuff to do with the IPs there, system uptime, downtime, and more. A little bit more about the storage too. And these fields, you can't really interact with them too much. You can see active users, and again, that's about it. There's not a vast amount. You can get notifications about when the system's powered on, powered down, or when things are installed. And again, if you've got a mass Amber network, so you've got more than one in your local area network, you can do it there. But again, the configuration options here, I think, could be a little better. And I think all of the apps I've seen so far are pretty good. They do what they say they will, but they're not exactly blowing me away in terms of features and functionality. If we switch to the router mode and we go ahead and bung that password in, and we can find out more information about the Wi-Fi side. So again, on the Wi-Fi side of things, we can change the SSID, play with some of the frequencies as well across those two bands. We got the WAN mode, whether we want to use it as a static IP or dynamic. We can have a look at router passwords, change it, upgrade it more on the fly. There are firmware updates on the latest version, but again, fairly sedentary stuff. And it's not until you go into the Amber OS browser and Amber router login on the desktop that we can see a little bit more distinction in terms of configuration options. So what we're going to do now is switch over to the desktop once again for the final part of the software overview and review. Which brings us quite neatly into the third part of the software review, where we are looking at the far more analytical available Amber OS browser. Now, this system here is where it's at. You have to go to Lattice node so that you can't actually directly patch into this interface via the network IP. If you want to play with containers and stuff that we'll talk about in a moment, you can. And even the router you can patch in via the IP. But this is one where you have to go in via this particular means. Now, from here, we've got a lot more information. I think that's slightly more techie-minded will like. I can understand why Amber put a few layers between this and the end user, because it would really undermine that whole friendly user interface, chewable, no tech knowledge side of things, but it's still great that you can access this information here. So we've already got the volume created with those 2 disks inside. It's a RAID 1 environment, as you can see there. If we go back into individual disks, we can find out more information about the health of the disks. And again, this is kind of what NAS users are going to be looking for here, for more real-time information about the system they're going to be utilizing there. If we go back to the dashboard, we can find out more information about CPU and memory utilization. We can have a look at the tasks that are being managed there, even the LAN connectivity. There's even a separate portal that we'll talk about in a moment for the router. Creating individual users, adding individual users, putting them into groups, creating additional shared folders within the system, and these are the folders that are going to be picked up via those client applications that we've discussed, can all be done there. Then there's your general configuration options, indexing service with regard to the AI recognition there, all of it happening, how and when you want it done, whether you want the indexing to be done manually or automatically. And with the photo indexing, you can say which folders you want it to have access to. These are some of the options that I would argue that maybe a user would like to have in that user-friendly side of things, but still, nevertheless, it's great to have it here. Lots of information there in the logs, and again, they have gone to the trouble of making sure that a lot more of the back-end stuff, there's a few extra layers to get to it. It has a slightly Synology vibe to it, that sort of things. And again, firmware updates are up to the latest firmware there. You can reset the system pretty easily. Remote support is when you want to grant Amber and their tech guys remote access to, help you along with any problems on the way. Again, nice to have that option, but to get to this option, it's going to require a little bit more tech knowledge than I think some users might like. And you also have to make sure that getting into the lattice node is borderline impossible outside of this network. And what I mean is, if I wasn't on the Wi-Fi, I tried getting into lattice node via another internet connection, and it would not let me. You have to patch in on the LAN. You can't access this level of control remotely from everything I could see. Advanced packages here is if you're going to be installing some of the bespoke stuff from Amber that they are creating over time for their systems. And then of course you've got general network management here, where you can change some of the back-end stuff on the system, how it applies and how it's visible on the system, the IP, whether you want to create bespoke firewall rules and DOS protection as well. So we can go ahead and make sure we can stop that for brute force hacking attempts. And then you've got your remote access, which again, I've not played with this, but this I think is something that I would like to have with remote access to the system. Not so much back-end, none of your SSH and stuff like that, but I kind of wish some of these options were more readily apparent in that desktop client at the very least. Now, you may have noticed on the left-hand side of the screen some big old buttons here. We can go into the file management just like we've seen in the other stuff we saw earlier on. So we go to People and Things. We can go ahead and go back into the People tab. Double click. Sorry about the seagull noise. That's what you get for living by the seaside. We can go ahead and look at Brian. Double click on Brian. We can go straight into pictures really, really easily. And again, they were loading up lovely and quick there in a way I kind of wish we saw earlier. And look at the scraping of the metadata there. Why isn't this metadata, all the background stuff about the device I used to take the picture, including some geographical information as well, why isn't this information more readily apparent in those other apps with the same ease? So again, a few little bits and bobs there that I don't like how some of these features aren't uniform across the whole system. They appear in some and not others. We've already talked about file management though, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. Now the backup tools, this is where you can get a bit more of a topographical view of the task that you're running. So as you see, you can run individual tasks from Time Machine to a standard rsync or real-time remote replication, and you've got snapshots in the background. Now, with remote replication, you do have to create these jobs manually, and again, this is the sort of stuff that I would have liked to have seen in those apps we've looked to up to this point. And I know I've not been particularly extensive on them, but given this brand's focus on keeping things as user-friendly as possible, kind of would have liked to have seen stuff like this more readily apparent there, and I wouldn't have had to go in manually in this way. And again, lots of those backup options on the mobile were there, particularly Time Machine and the mobile backup tools. But if we go back into that Amber IX app from earlier, the desktop client application, it's not quite as apparent to me how those backups would take place in that same way. You can create tasks, go into some of the configuration options, but I think this app could stand to be a little bit more intuitive overall. Indeed, even as I said that last sentence, I was slightly worried that I'd missed out on some sort of software that may be out in the market that I'm not aware of that allows me to patch into the back-end options of this system using a Windows client. So I headed over to Amber's own website and I browsed through. As you can see, they mention the setup with Amber Pro, something we're going to talk about in a moment with containers. They mention the App Center. They mention Amber Anywhere, which is basically them saying that you can synchronize it with other third-party clients. So again, we're not going to include third-party clients. Support Anywhere, all this sort of stuff where you can connect with their online team that can sort you out. And then the crossover with Nextcloud, the crossover with all the different business class feature services. But again, this is third-party stuff that I don't really want to refer to too much in this, because I don't think it's fair to judge this system off the basis of other apps that have worked, and create independent platforms. This is about the Amber Pro on its own. All these different apps that are on the system that are available are all added to it. And even when I went into their own pages, we could see the number of apps that were listed there. And as you see, the My Amber Cloud is the one that we already looked at here. We can go into the Amber Life IX, that's the one that we've already been talking about. The desktop client, then you've got the mobile client, then you've got Camera Roll. So basically we have gone through the majority of these. So there isn't really an app that allows us to go into the back end like this and adapt some of these options in such an intuitive way, which I know is counter to what Amber are trying to do to keep this as simple as possible. And certainly with their combined NAS and router solution, they're trying to come up with a much more user-friendly and less tech-savvy version of NAS. But I think by doing that, they are restricting some options. Now, Amber Finder here is if you have multiple Ambers in the in your business network and you've got them at different sites, you can flick between them here. And of course, at the bottom there, we have Amber Pro. And Amber Pro is this idea that you can access different container applications. Now, from here, I've already installed a container. Now, full disclosure, I'm not hugely savvy about containers. I have not used them a great deal. I know more about, if I'm honest, virtual machines and implementation with software as a service type stuff recently. But when it comes to containers, that's a little bit more techie for me. I've already installed Odo on there. So if you've got an Odo system, which is kind of, again, software as a service, it's kind of an office platform and business management software for the back end. You can integrate the system towards that, so you can have localized access and localized synchronization. Same goes, you've got a synchronization tool as well with Motion Eye. These are apps that are readily available in the App Center. So if we go into the App Store, we can see there's not a vast amount right now, and you can install custom images and custom containers and create your own. But the App Center could stand to do a little bit more. And of course, there's Nextcloud we saw earlier, and installing these containers is pretty straightforward. You just click download, and because it's in the App Store, bang, it just sticks them straight inside there. And again, Amber Anywhere is the service that we're using right now. Again, we've only just installed the Amber Pro stuff there for the latest version. So at the moment, while it's downloading that tool, I can imagine the system's quite busy. And as you can see, the Amber trial there, and there's the stuff about the support everywhere stuff, is all kind of built in. But again, I don't quite like the usage of the word subscription and trial there. I'm not 100% certain how I feel about this stuff in the background. But again, that's something for later on in the system's life, I'm sure. And again, the container side of things, that will be a way that a lot of users who go for a system like this are going to, if they have a slightly more tech background, make more of this system, I think, than others. Because I think I like what Amber are trying to do, but I do think it's going to be a little bit limited. The glass ceiling is a little low, and for people, it's kind of the thing that happened in the past with the Drobo data transporter and Apple's own time capsule, their own time machine that will localize NAS, and the kind of the passport thing. Those systems, I feel, had their own limitations built in. Not so much intentionally, but certainly ones that would stop a lot of users from being able to make the most of their data outside the confines of the system. And containers allow users to do that, but I think given the modest hardware inside this system, I question just how much that is going to be possible on this. Now, while that downloads a few containers there, I'm going to have a look at the final part here, and this is the router. Now, the router side of things, unsurprisingly, much like the client apps versus desktop apps that we've already talked about thus far, I've got to say that I think they've given you a lot more control and configuration on the browser client here. Look at all of that compared than we saw on the mobile application. And I get it, they're trying to keep it simple, it makes sense. But still, I like this amount of control, and I wish this amount of control was available even in a tab basic advanced that you see there, that it was available on the mobile and desktop clients that we're seeing. So again, you can flick between the frequencies, create a guest network on one of those frequencies, enable the parental controls if you choose. The level of configuration on the parental controls, you can't really do a vast amount there, although you can play with it on the side here and add barred lists and stuff like that. So it's parental control, but with a lot more human intervention. It doesn't take advantage of, say, Google Safe Search. But again, you can play with a number of these options here in the background. You can, again, lots of these options we've already seen before, but I just think there's a lot more to them here, where you can assign identities and more, and identify devices that are connected. So you can bind them to make sure that they're not going anywhere, and you can identify them long term. Wi-Fi frequency changes there can all be adjusted to automatic or manual configurations. Even the guest network you can play a little bit with. And, you know, again, if you're using those different frequencies, have those guest networks change as the day goes on in terms of their security and coverage. WPS button, as you're aware, that's just so you can sync devices on the Wi-Fi without messing around with login codes. Power control, you know, this is a 24/7 device. I'm not turning it off. You shouldn't either. And again, if you're going to go with port forwarding, those options are readily available here, something I was slightly worried wouldn't be included. And then, of course, if you want to patch in with other servers, it's all kind of possible there. I was kind of hoping there'd be a little bit more of link aggregation, perhaps, on those two ports. But sadly, it looks like if it is there, I haven't found it. Again, a little bit more configuration options here towards the bottom. And if you go to the tools section, this is where it kind of goes into that realm of far more techie. But I like the configuration. The Amber has grown on me a great deal more as soon as I've started seeing all of these configuration options. The fact that these options were not present early doors on those client apps, for me, was what let it down. And I appreciate I've come at this from a far more techie background. And there you have it. That was the Amber Pro. So what do we think? What's the verdict? Well, again, I've got to try and look at this with as little of my own NAS background as possible, which, let's be completely honest, has been incredibly tough in this video, and I have faltered many, many times. In its simplicity, in what it's trying to do, in trying to give people their own private cloud without the stress of knocking around with IPs, mucking around with local versus remote access, easy sharing, comparable to that of Google Drive and OneDrive and Dropbox and stuff like that. I think it does a very good job. I think in terms of the clients and applications that are really available to you, some have been better than others. And I think, you know, there are things about this system that I would recommend to people. I would certainly recommend, if you are coming at NAS as a complete novice and you looked at a lot of the content that we've made in the past about NAS and gone, whoa, slow down there, mate. This is very much in your wheelhouse. It is a system that is designed much like the way TVs and consoles and computers have changed over the years into this incredibly straightforward and user-friendly thing. I think this is a variant of having your own server with the integrated router, of course, that I think means that anyone can have their own private cloud. And I think if that is their ambition, to have your own version of the cloud under your control and your security remit, they have done a good job. However, When I say I can recommend it for those things, there's of course other reasons why I would not recommend this device. First and foremost, that storage capability on those 2 Seagate Barracuda hard drives. I am not a fan of that. Also, those client applications could be a little hit and miss throughout the video. And also, I understand the reasoning behind packaging a lot of the more complex decisions behind more dedicated UIs and particular access points, but limiting a lot of that access and configuration on the mobile applications, on the localized client, and basically telling people in a manner of speech, no, you cannot access this information unless you have the relevant skill set, and you have to follow our breadcrumbs to find it. That I am less in love with. And I think there is a slight identity crisis. I love the design, I love the rhetoric, and I think if you are looking for an incredibly user-friendly storage system, this might be for you, but bear in mind that is a steep old price tag to pay for relative ease. And unless you're going to be utilizing this system to its fullest, I mean taking advantage of the cloud space 2 gig, not so sure, and you're going to be replacing a primary root in your system, and you are going to take the time to take advantage of that system of container support, because that's when this system shines, when you can utilize the container applications. Run a Plex container, run some of those home business and software as a service plugin, the collaboration suite stuff. That's good, Nextcloud more, then I can recommend this. But as it stands, I would maybe hold back and either get the newer version or watch the software develop, because I think they are going places, but they're not quite there yet for me. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know it's been a long one, but I wanted to do this system justice and not just put on my elite level NAS hat and go, no. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, click like. If you want to learn more, click subscribe. And of course, if you are looking for the right data storage solution for you, go to the link in the description to NAS Compares, where we do talk a lot about data storage and of course give free data storage advice to you. So if you need it, it's completely free. There's no commitment. Chuck your email in there, but we don't keep it. You know, there's donation buttons, use them, but don't use them. It's up to you. And it's 2 real human beings that answer your emails. Myself and Eddie, the web guy. It might take us an extra day or so to answer your emails, but we do answer everyone. It's just we have lives, you know. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.